Did you go? No, I think that was a dog. Yeah, the dog went got stepped on by Andrew. So that was.
Traveling down. Okay.
You heard me complain.
No, I didn't. No, I didn't.
Oh, no. You'll bump my coffee. Great. Okay. Raw.
Looks like a very collegial place.
Okay, why are we here? My goal as an organizer with the Debt Collective is obviously to build power and to change the system. My goal as a filmmaker is to capture people actually thinking and listening and engaging in the kinds of conversations that I think are really important and necessary. But really, I think I want us to think together. That's the goal. And that's why we've invited all of you. And we're actually in an amazing political moment. There's a lot to be afraid of. And yet there's incredible possibility. I guess the first thing I'd love to, and let's not do this where everyone answers it, but maybe if someone really feels moved to begin, like why did you even go to college in the first place? What causes us to make that decision? Yeah, Pam.
Well, I went to college late. Like I had already had maybe 4.5 kids by then. Because I am the parent of 8 kids. So I wasn't raised in a household where anybody went to college. So no one ever talked about going to college. And when I got out of school, my jobs were all secretarial and typing and answering phones and that kind of thing. But as my family was growing, I was like, well, I don't think I could do this forever because I'm probably not going to make enough money to take care of them. So I didn't know. The idea just came in my head. Well, why not go to college? To me, it was more or less, even going to college was like a job. It was like, you got to go, you can't miss because you got to get this degree because this is how you're going to get, further along in life. And in reality, that wasn't my reality. I mean, I did get the degree, I got the bachelor's, but at the end of the day, I had this $200,000+ of student debt. So trying to go to a bank and get a loan or a mortgage, it was like, they're like, yeah, right. Like, are you serious? Sometimes I think I made my situation worse off going to college, but that was the reason I did it, because I just wanted to make a better life for me and my kids. So.
Does that resonate with other people?
Yes.
Yeah. I had over $70,000 of student loan debt. I'm sitting at home, I'm watching TV, and I'm like Maury or something like that, and here comes this Everest commercial that says, hey, you can work and go to school and do all the things you love and still, make money, and you can do this in 18 months. I'm like, oh, this is great. Let me just check it out, whatever. But then they suck you in. Mm-hmm. And they call you 10 times a day. They tell you that you have to do this because if you don't, you'll have to wait 6 months. And so you go to school. You get this education. And then you're at graduation and they tell you, hey, we might not be able to get you a job like we told you in the beginning 4 years ago, but if you don't sign this piece of paper, you can't walk across that stage. Your family can't see you except that piece of paper that's supposedly costing you $70,000.
Tell us what that, this literally happened to you, right?
It happened to me, yeah.
What did the paper say?
So the paper said we would not try to sue them for not being able to get us a job like they said they would be able to do in the beginning when we first enrolled in school. Yeah. This is what they tell us in the room as we're putting our caps and gowns on. Like, hey, by the way, if you don't sign this, you can't walk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. To clarify, this is a for-profit
college. It was a
right?
for-profit college.
Yeah. Did you even know there was a difference between for-profit colleges and private colleges?
No idea.
So my education experience is a little bit different than what I've heard so far. I'm a student debtor, but I'm also a former employee of the for-profit education system, and so I was a whistleblower. I was in financial aid for 13 years, but I still managed to get $180,000 in student debt. Like from the age of 4, I was reading really well. I was like on a 3rd grade reading level. And so I just, as a little girl, was like, I'm going to college. I just knew it. I was like gonna go. And I was in an environment where education wasn't respected. I mean, I grew up in Vegas. I grew up around a lot of like casino industry parents, and people would get really pissed off at me, like, quit saying that, you're not going to college. Like, you think you're gonna get up out of here and things like that. And at that time I was like, you're right, I'm not gonna go to college. So at 18, I landed this job working at the front desk of ITT Tech. And then all of a sudden, the people that were in a situation like me that they were told you're never gonna go to school, they were coming in and enrolling. And it was like, oh my God, like I have a chance now. And I was so proud of the fact that I could say I put myself through college. I knew it was poor, I knew it was low quality, it was such bullshit, but I could look you in the eye and feel good about my job because it was gonna get us somewhere. No, like where it got us is just unbelievable.
I much rather would have gone to a regular college. You know, like I would have loved to go be in a dorm, to be on a campus, like a huge like a beautiful campus. But that wasn't an option for me because I didn't have the resources. My family didn't have the resources. And so I often wonder what it would be like if we didn't have this price tag on what we were paying for this degree, and like what choices you'd be able to make about what you wanted to go to school because you weren't worried about what you had to pay for. Asking young students to take out these loans without the understanding of what they're getting into exactly and what that's going to look like in the future is predatory.
Elaine, you want to talk a little bit
About what made you go to college?
Yeah, I mean, what else was I gonna do? I mean, like, really though, I mean, I was an athlete in high school, but had I not been a volleyball player, I still knew that my parents wanted me to go to college because it's either that or the military. Because that's what they tell you at school, is that you are going to college or you're going to the military, and if you don't do one of those things, then you're not gonna have a future. Those are your pathways to success. What I thought about when you were talking about wanting to go to a real school and get to a dorm, it's like, it's not even that thing that you think that it, you know what I'm saying, that you think that it is, which is so interesting that it actually isn't that. Just because you're going to this university, the institution is not a place of learning anymore. And it wasn't because of the students that were in the classroom didn't want to learn. They were trying to get to the bag. You know, like they were trying to get money, like they are trying upward mobility. Like, I need to get my degree so I can move on. Yeah.
When I hear people talk about getting a job at the other end and just being able to feed yourself, take care of your kids, pay the rent, has become, the purpose. People shouldn't have to go to college so they can pay the rent. They should be able to pay the rent and get a job and take care of themselves. And then education should be liberatory. It should be something that we can disarticulate from the need to just to survive.
There's this common narrative about college as aspiration, but college is also a refuge. I went to college because it was a way not to die or disappear. So it's like, friends that I had, they would literally disappear for years, and then they would come back and they were incarcerated. So it was like college was a place where people didn't die. And that's what the city was. And so I was like, why not? It wasn't about like getting a job or anything like that, because I never seen anybody do that. I could have got a job down the street. I didn't know what any of that was. So I was like, I'm just gonna go because that's what people don't get shot. And if I gotta take out debt for that, then I'm not dead or I'm not locked up.
I just wanted to say something. A couple things come to mind. First of all, I'm a student debtor by marriage, but my own story, I think, is just a really important sort of classed and raced counterpoint, right? Which is that I was born into an upper middle class white family in San Francisco. Both of my parents had PhDs. I had an older sister who went to Yale. I went to super fancy private schools. They paid my whole way through, and then I, got an SAT tutor and I went to Yale, right? I had to have a job for my spending money, but my parents paid the way, But one of the things that occurs to me is like the predatory inclusion of for-profit colleges, as all of you go around and talk about, is so clear. And yet Delaney's story and Mark's story are actually stories about debt from so-called public schools, right? For-profit colleges is the sort of like the worst kind of predatory inclusion. And yet what we are told is an alternative, right? Going through a series of community colleges, public schools, HBCU public schools, right? Generate their own forms of immiserating debt as well. So I want to just, be sure that it's not like,
I have something to say. Yeah, so I started at Cal State Northridge, and I had a full financial aid package. I'm a survivor of domestic violence, and so my household like disintegrated in a certain kind of way, and I had changed something on my FAFSA. Just like one little question asked me if I was a ward of the court. And I was like, I don't know what that means, And so I was thinking I was like, my dad's incarcerated, so I was trying to figure it out. And I changed it, and they audited my FAFSA. And so then I came in and they said, what's your situation? Who's this information on your FAFSA? And I said, it's my aunt. That's who takes care of me. And they're like, no, you can't. That's not your guardian. What the hell are you talking about? This woman pays the rent. That's not, it isn't a black household. Like, she pays the bills. That's my guardian. They're like, yeah. They said, no, you have to contact your father. So I had to write him a letter. I had to stick my FAFSA in an envelope and mail it to a prison in Tennessee. Wait for that to come back. And so then I missed that whatever that registration was. And so when I came back to school, I lost my financial aid and I had to take out all of these loans. And so that's when it started. And then when I went to UCLA, like it reset. And then I didn't have to take out any debt anymore. So then I was like kind of free at that point. But by then I like racked up I was like $25,000 just to kind of make my way to UCLA.
My partner has over $200,000 of student loans. So we've been navigating that for the past number of years, and it's really hard to talk about that. And even, anybody we talk to, family or whatever, they were just like, you get away from this partner who has this. This is like such a terrible thing for your life. Right. And he is not a terrible person. So he has this public job now. And that's great, but we're still counting on being in debt essentially for the rest of our lives, which has changed the nature of what we're doing. We're not having children, we're not getting married, and it's shaped our lives in incredible ways.
I know you want to add, but I just wanted to say, and those were the exact talking points that we use for the for-profit. People weren't getting married, they weren't gonna have kids, they can't buy a house because of this big mountain of predatory, illegal, illegitimate debts that we got from these for-profit schools. So it's just kind of interesting to hear those are the reasons that we were fighting with the debt collective for the for-profit schools, and it's the same thing for the public. Wow.
Religiously, but a vegetarian. But they happen to be vegan, and they really spent that. No, this stuff I love.
So this is the scholars section of the day. We are all scholars.
The pressure's on.
We are all scholars. And once again, everyone is invited to speak. But maybe we can begin with, what does it feel like as a teacher within the university, right? There's pressures on students, but there's also pressures on faculty. And maybe beginning there, if anyone is moved to speak.
I want to thank the people who spoke earlier and sharing their stories. And I said to Marissa, it reminds me of when you talked about shame. And, Michelle Alexander's very powerful work around the new Jim Crow about part of the trap is not only the material circumstances that people are in, but that sort of sense of shame or self-blame or something that we get conned into that also keeps us from fighting back in ways that we need to. So I appreciated people's candor, and I think that I see that continuum with shame around other kinds of marginalization and oppression in society right now.
I would say that there's so much shame and stigma to actually acknowledging you have that. And in my classes, I began to integrate the topic into my classes and ask students to speak up about it. And that's when I really discovered there was this huge reservoir of shame and stigma. And that's what got me involved in the debt resistance movement. It pushed me out. And when Occupy came along, I was ready. And in terms of the impact, I think what we see is students approaching education in a transactional way. For an educator, it's very sad and it's appalling to see it, but you can't blame them. They approach education in this, how much is this worth? What am I going to get out of it? What's the return on investment? That kind of mentality just marched right in.
Our students are very understandably anxious about everything. Grades, survival, debt, whether they can get into the class, whether they'll get out of the class. And many of us are committed to actually teaching things that involve dwelling, thinking, ruminating, rethinking, reorienting yourselves. And that anxiety and that pedagogy are just on a collision course. They don't work well together. And I have tremendous compassion for that, as I think you were suggesting you do, but it really creates a dilemma. I think the other dilemma that many of us have who have the privilege to have tenured positions is watching those just fall away. Universities, public universities are just shedding them very, very rapidly. And that means that increasingly our colleagues are adjuncts. The university doesn't have to pay their healthcare and benefits and pensions and so forth. And how to maintain things like curriculums and majors and graduate programs at the same time we build solidarity with what have really become the day laborers of teaching, I think is just an enormous challenge for many of us.
How do you feel entering academia at this moment when the system seems to be crumbling?
Walking into a house that's on fire. That's what it feels like. Yeah. And just like praying, like, am I gonna find a spot that's not on fire in the corner somewhere? And then there's like survivor's guilt that goes on with that. Like I started this, I told myself I wanted to be a professor in 2006. 15 years later, I'm just about to step into the door and I feel like shit about doing it if I get a tenure track job. I'm not saying I didn't work, but everybody's working and everybody's brilliant and all of these important projects that should have good jobs, dignified employment, and they don't.
Are you saying a tenure? What is that?
Yeah, basically there's like a caste system of academic employment. So the top, the most secure, but it's like a tenure track position. And so this is employment where I have higher pay, I have benefits, fringe benefits, but I don't have tenure yet. But if I do a whole bunch of stuff, then I can get tenure. And tenure is, actual tenured professors can speak to this because I'm not, so I don't fully understand it. But from a grad student position, I want that.
Tenure means they have to give you a reason before they fire you.
What does that look like for you guys if, for say, your students went on a strike? Could you, with that protection power, could you participate and not get in trouble for it?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. The fact is that tenured faculty have enormous amounts of power, and here's the problem. By the time many of them get there, they've basically gone over to the other side. That is, politically, they think they deserve what they have, and that the problems of the university and the underclass and the poor and all the rest of that are not their problems, and that in fact what they're concerned about is making sure that their benefits and their perks, their sabbaticals, their research funds, their laboratories and all the rest are funded first. And so your technical answer to your question is Absolutely. They are approachable, and you can say, will you use my power, your power for my struggle?
Yeah.
Will you lend us some of that capital?
Yeah.
Because they can. They absolutely can. And don't let any of them say, oh, no, I can't.
Yeah.
Because they can, it's whether they will.
Yeah.
Can I say something about tenure, however, that connects with the broader issue of debt? When we teach grad students, right, something that happens sometimes is that if they're taught, as they should, by professors with tenure, sometimes they want to become professors with tenure. That's why they're in to get PhDs. So they get in debt in order to get these PhDs so they can be like you someday and have tenure and teach and do all this wonderful research and thinking and advocacy and all these wonderful things that come with being a tenure professor. So, and they end up becoming adjuncts, teaching 6 classes everywhere. They have debt, they're suffering, and you as their former teacher, you are like, oh my God, what did I do? Right?
Yeah, faculty, especially black faculty, are in the position of trying to do what I call democratic pedagogy, knowing that our classrooms are so differentiated. And for me to teach black students and then assess them when they come from a failed schooling system so that they leave with debt and without a degree, and that I'm forced into that position has been the most torturous thing. But it's really important to be in that space and figure out how to have the university space be about breaking these molds of induction into really, really problematic ideas about what intellectual work is.
I do want us to end with this question of, well, what is a public university? Right? Like what
is or should.
Is or should, both those things, right? What makes a public university public?
My university only gets about 20% of its budget from the state now.
Wow.
UC gets 12%.
Yeah.
13.
Yeah, we used to get 15, now
So
we
what you're
get 20.
saying is it's not public.
Yeah, it's not funded by the government. It hasn't been for a while.
So who funds it?
You do. Your debt does.
Tuition.
So it's only public if you get money. I mean, you're a public school, but getting private money?
Yeah.
A true public university means you're not paying tuition.
Okay, but
It sounds like the term public doesn't stand for what it should stand for.
Right.
Like we're using a word that doesn't mean what it should mean.
because she pays tuition.
Can I say something about the definition of public universities, though, very quickly? So a public university needs to get funded and needs to get the resources for the benefit of a particular community. So now in my imagination, I want to offer this. The public university as a concept has to be the kind of place that is aware of those inequalities. And it is working hard to fix them all the time, because that's their community. I'm the public university and this is my community and we are the same thing. So I'm going to get those kids that want to be here studying this thing, here studying this thing. And to do that, I need to get involved with these other institutions and these other structures. And I think some of those things we can start doing in the now. They do require a big imagination and they do require major transformations, of course. But I wanted to start envisioning a public university that we can start working on Monday when we get back to work.
And I mean, speaking to that, I think that's where one of the principal contradictions can emerge at so-called public universities is to be very schematic and vulgar about it, right? When the UC system was a lot whiter, it was basically free. It fit the model of a public university in the sense that there was basically very minimal tuition, and that wasn't that long ago. 25 years ago, right? When the UC system undergraduate demographic did not look the way it does now. It's almost inevitably, right, becoming blacker, browner, more working class. So at that point, the state starts to defund it so that we don't think about it as institutional war on working class people and black and brown people. It gets turned into austerity. Or something else, right? And it's something that I think we always got to come back to. The Supreme Court.
What's austerity?
Austerity is an institutional. It's
budget cuts.
It's institutional policy, but it's also a culture. Austerity is a culture that tells you gotta do more with less, right? And you gotta pay more for less, and you gotta also put up with more shit. That's what austerity really. It means that you go to the classroom that's leaking. That's leaking water from the top, and you deal with it because of austerity, right? Or your student-teacher ratio doubles, right? And it's because
resources.
It's a normalized cultural practice, right? And you live with less.
Only because it's on the tip of my tongue, President Reagan literally said, we should not be in the business of subsidizing intellectual curiosity. That is a quote. from Ronald Reagan, who was then governor of California in 1967, in response to the politicization of campuses, right? And then on the tail of that, he said education should be a privilege, not a right, because there was a time in California where, mostly for white people, but education was a right, right? It was tuition-free and very low fee, and he saw that as subsidizing precisely the kinds of politics that we're talking about now.
If we wanted to also connect this to neoliberalism, it's important that what Reagan did in that moment was consult with a guy on the UCLA campus named Buchanan. And it was Buchanan who said to him, make them pay, they'll quiet down. He took that advice directly from a think tank, a neoliberal think tank, and put it into practice. And many billions of dollars later, we have a half privatized public system with debt, with high tuition and fees, and with dying arts and humanities.
I'm so tired of hearing that there's not enough for people like me or for struggling people, while this 1% or this small group of people has enough, but there's not enough for the rest of us.
The opening sentence of my book was, "There is enough." It isn't. It got cut. But originally that's how I opened, with just the sentence, "There is enough." A budget is a moral document. It's a reflection of our priorities. If it so chooses, those budget committees can write a budget that reflects the priorities of the broader public, right? Spend public money for public purpose and invest those resources. And if, right now the federal government's got a budget where they spend about $4.5 trillion this year. Next year, if we were lucky and we had a different, Congress with a different complexion, a different mindset, different ambitions, they could sit down and write a $6 trillion budget. Yeah. They could do that. I mean, the politics obviously are an enormous hurdle, but the financing is actually the easiest part to handle.
So are they purposely writing a budget with not enough?
Yes, they are.
Can I just clarify?
In the United States. In the United States. It's not, I mean,
I mean, which is perhaps not surprising. Yeah, her. Yeah. But then
Thank you all. This has been such a wonderful day. Part of why we wanted to do this is because we're actually in an amazing moment. Ideas are being discussed that felt that they were so outside of the mainstream that you couldn't say them without coming off as ridiculous. And now you can. We can talk about full-scale student debt cancellation. We can talk about free college. We can talk about a Green New Deal. I want to open space for the Debt Collective to talk about the organizing that's happened just really quickly, concisely, because this is an attempt to figure out where we have leverage and what we can do together. And the Debt Collective has played an incredible role in getting the idea of full-scale debt cancellation out there by proving it can be done.
So the Debt Collective's not, as people have been saying, is not a student debt-focused organization. We have medical debt, student debt, housing debt, fines and fees. And so what kind of leverage could we build almost like a union would in the workplace, right? When you go and say, look, we're not going to show up, we're not going to do our work, we're not going to keep making these widgets unless you give us this, this, and this. And we can withdraw our labor power in order to make these demands. And what would it look like for debtors to try a similar kind of leverage, to try to build a similar kind of power?
We started striking our debt. We stopped paying. We said no more. And that got really powerful. I got my $30,000. Pam got her $220K. We had $1 billion at this point worth of student loan forgiveness. If we can do it for some, why not all? It's possible if we're able to do it for us,
Was there any kind of punitive response when people stopped paying?
Yeah, once you slip into delinquency 270 days and you've defaulted, yeah, there's definitely consequences.
But I think it's important that we knew what we were getting into. And so, like, I think that that's, like, a really powerful thing, too. But, like...
A lot of people, though, in that situation, they were already there. A lot of people had already defaulted, or a lot of people were getting their wages garnished, their taxes were being taken away from them. So that's what made this movement so powerful, is because we were already going through it and had no idea why. So once we learned the reason why, we said, screw it, we're gonna go ahead and take control back. We're gonna take our power back, and we're gonna fight against these predatory lenders. We're gonna let them know that you don't own us, we own you.
1.1 million new student borrowers default every single year. That's 1 million new union members every year. Letting people know what a debt strike is and how it could work, and inviting them to start thinking about it. You know, imagine a medical debtors union making demands for Medicare for all. Imagine what a mortgage debtors union could have done in advance of 2008. So part of it is also trying to understand the idea of debt as leverage in a financialized economy. It's a new place where we can organize collectively. But at this point, I'm somebody who's paying my student loans every month. Am I ready to default? Absolutely not. I'm scared as fuck. I have 2 little kids. My credit score is very serious to me. We put groceries on the credit card at the end of the month because we don't make it to the end of the month. I'm not ready for my credit score to be trashed, right? So levels of engagement.
But I think what people need to know is, 15 people striked and made a huge difference and put this on the map. So if everyone now is currently defaulting in deferment or administrative forbearance, if all those people also declare that they are officially striking, like, that's going to be huge.
We believe, as members of Debt Collective, that college is a right. It is not a privilege. You deserve to be educated. That's what we have to say, like, okay, where does this end? And where does, the actual education and the community begin?
What would free college mean, right? Like, what difference would it make?
What free college should mean.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Is college that is not only free at the level of tuition, but supports all of the survival needs and thriving needs that every tier of society requires. That's really expensive, but it also means radically rethinking our curriculums, our cultures, our college cultures, and it's absolutely worth it. So that's my vision.
You have to go. But what about admissions? Because that's what I work. Because we could eliminate the cost, but there could be other barriers.
Yes.
You have free college, so you have all these people applying, so it becomes more competitive, becomes more restrictive. People who have gone to, inadequate K through 12 schools can't get in, and and there you have more of a stratified system. You have more people left out, and it's color coded. Mm-hmm. The admissions block will be around all the other inequalities that exist in the society. So just make it free and not changing the admissions. The old City College model was free tuition and open admissions, right? So is that the demand?
I have something very short to contribute to Barbara's question, which is, if there was an open admissions demand, then what you're doing is you're putting pressure on the entire race and class asymmetry of how K through 12 even works, right? And so that creates natural organic alliances with all kinds of movements that are on the ground.
And creates new opponents.
Antagonism.
Including most of our colleagues.
Absolutely it does. No, absolutely it does.
And so why? So please spell out, why would most of your colleagues not like this?
Because they want so-called college-prepared students. They want upper middle-class students.
They don't know their math,
That's what they want.
And we shouldn't have to do that in the classroom.
But there, I mean, back to your question of rethinking the curriculum, but we do have to prepare,
Yes.
So I try to have a graduate seminar on the Civil War, and somebody's not had any history class. They don't know when that happened. They don't know, so we can't have a seminar. So then we have to go back and do an intro class. And so you know what I mean? So you just have to.
You just do that.
Which is,
I'm
not averse to it. Yeah. Well, but you have to organize it in a way that makes sense, right?
Gotta be dynamic.
So half the people come there for a seminar and the other half come there for an intro class. But the other opponent that you will get is you'll get student opposition. Because students, we've all been socialized. Students feel
I got into the school because I worked hard. I got in because I got test scores. They do. Yeah. And so you get pushback. And because if you let everybody in, my degree is not worth anything, right? I worked hard to get in.
Yeah, that is like when I've talked to other students and we're trying to, have different conversations, that is the absolutely, if it's not how will we pay for it, it is, there is no point in me coming here if everybody can come.
Does that bring us back to where we want to be then? Like maybe the transition period is this thing is not worth anything anymore, and then it can actually get back to education? Yeah, it's like what am I doing this for? And then it's like then you start then you go pick up the book and like I really like this James Baldwin book. I'm gonna go to college and learn about it.
I think so. I want to segue us also into the power. Where is our power?
I think we need to segue to wine for the next part of it.
Yeah, wine is the where is our wine? Power. I actually just power and wine. Wine and power.
So that's it. Yeah.
Can I mention the word capitalism?
I was going to mention the word socialism.
Either. We've gone through this entire day without really talking about the economic system that we're living in this country, certainly an advanced phase of capitalism. And a lot of what we're discussing here bumps up right against the limits of basic capitalist precepts. There is not a lot of profit in what we've been talking about, and there's a hell of a lot of profit in the status quo, which is basically, when it comes to student debt, a form of indenture. People talk about this, and it's not a metaphor. So how do we talk about the reforming education without talking about vast reforms?
Universities are complicit in the project of capitalism and capitalist inequality by giving a veneer of differing value to people. This is your level of smarts, your level of smarts, your level of smarts. So I think these conversations do push up against the logic of capitalism, which is competitive, selective, elite, and universities bite right into that and give it kind of a nice cover.
No, that's why I was gonna say I want to insist on finding some kind of language to undermine and eventually erode and abolish meritocracy. Because it's the notion that people who deserve something should get.
And also the people at the top are there because they have merit. It reinforces that
meritocracy.
The people in the university are in there because they've earned it according to some objective, measurable qualities that they have that other people don't.
Okay. Everything that everybody's saying, especially the academia, about all the stuff and everything that has to be done and everything. To me, college for all, it's just very simple. Just saying it, college for all. And for me, it just means college for all who wants to go. And I'm just listening to all the, the infrastructure, the this, the that, the this, the that. And I know that eventually that's all going to have to be worked out. But basically it's like, yay or nay, college for all or no?
I really take this point because in the middle of our student strike, we had professors in particular insisting that what you need is a plan before you can have the move towards it. And my vice chancellor at the University of the Witwatersrand has said, what I'm into is radical pragmatism. And I'm just like, no, dude, all we need, and I support you, we will have to figure the shit out. We can't do it, even though there's nice wine, we can't do it here. It's in the process, even though we have to take into account that there are logistical resource questions and whatever. It's in that process that we'll get there.
If you do it badly, if you deliver the promise poorly, it will all fall apart.
Okay,
it'll be the support for the program.
Yes, but if the argument is that you can't move unless we have a clear plan, we will never move.
Exactly.
Well, because then you get stuck with only intellectualizing.
Many of the problems of the 20th century in terms of radical change have been not having a thorough enough plan.
We've seen this happen. I don't think this is the argument, is that there needs to be a plan before we act. We're saying as we act, we need to be critical of what we do, because there's already a plan already inside of your demand. So when we say free college for all means something already. It means not black, not indigenous, not marginalized. Almost nobody listens to historians. I think to their detriment. I know we're annoying, but we're nervous because like we see patterns, we've seen how shit has hit the fan before, we've seen how stuff's been co-opted, and we're just offering, case studies.
When we use blueprint, I don't know if we mean an action plan or if we mean legislation, because they're different, right? And if we mean college for all, I worked on the College for All Act in 2015. You got to write that stuff down. You can't hand wave your way to just call it an act, college for all, the end. I mean, you have to fill in all the blanks and bubbles, and you have to articulate the federal government commitment and exactly what is
If you don't, they will.
Yeah, exactly. But I want to say one more thing.
Right.
Even the most well-intentioned politicians aren't going to do the boldest stuff without some pressure from below. That's where you get truly transformative, bold, ambitious. This is big stuff. Debt cancellation for 1 point now, what is it, 7 trillion? That doesn't happen without the actions of groups like these.
I wasn't trying to say we mustn't think it through and that historians and academics aren't important, but in the space where I'm sitting with the Debt Collective, who actually did a whole lot of shit, that's why we're here. My point is to support those people. And my concern is also around resources and classrooms, but we have to play our part and figure out how the collective can do that together and not let this thing tip in a different direction. So it's like how to balance those things. I don't know if that's dialectical.
We need plans, we need power, right? We've gone from organizing in context where we were laughed at to then starting to win. And now actually I think winning the moral argument, right? But we still need to figure out where our leverage is and how to move forward. So where do you think power is?
I mean, I think power is with the people. I mean, I think that like power starts here. I think it starts with, I just think it starts with people. I think that there is power though, that is like up there. It's not that I don't think that those are powerful people. I think there's different types of power. But I think that organized people have the most power, not just people like
randomly together. It's just crowded.
Yeah, then it's just like everybody hanging out. It's like a jam. But I think organized people and like a collective education and all of that, I think that creates a powerful people.
Yeah, I think that we as people are powerful, but so is our dollar, and whether that's spending or like the debt that we all hold, because there's so much collective debt. And I've found that through the work that we've done that is super powerful, and it is really scary to these higher entities. We don't have time to wait for them to decide to make a decision that benefits people like me. And so I think that the strike is a powerful movement because it gives them no choice. I just think it's crucial that we move, not fast, but move right now.
I'm now asserting myself in the queue.
But once the camera goes off, it doesn't go on again.
Does anybody else want to speak on camera?
That's the thing.
No, thank you so much for
Okay, now the off camera can go. You've got an off camera, but Barbara's first.
Okay, is it cocktails?
Barbara off camera.